On this episode of Still Loading 2023 in Review. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval. It is the end of 2023. We have somehow survived this year. We have made it. This episode's actually dropping, at least on the free feed. It's already been out for my patrons on New Year's Eve. So happy New Year's, y'all. I guess this is actually coming out. At least in my time zone, it's coming out 5 hours before midnight. But you know what? All the same, maybe I'll release this earlier. Who knows? Maybe I'll go crazy. Instead of releasing it at 7 p.m., I'll release it at noon Eastern. Ooh. But no, we are here to discuss and review 2023. Joining me, as always, for these year in review episodes is my buddy TJ from the great white north itself. He flew down on the back of a camel. That's right, a camel could fly, and it's in Canada. I don't know where I'm going with this analogy, but god damn it, there's a camel, and he flew on it. He came down, with a whole gallon of maple syrup, dumping it all over the place, so that way we could, follow his trail if we ever needed to get in contact again. And he came down to good old the US of A, and we're recording a podcast together over online. But that's how it works. So TJ, welcome back to the show, my friend. Welcome, my brother from the great white north. How the hell are you?
Every year, not well, since last year, you do like that elongated intro, and I'm just sitting here like, what can I say to this?
I normally try to make it make sense, but the first animal that popped into my mind this year was a camel, and so I just said, fuck it, we're just going to go with a camel.
Yeah, whatever, man. I mean, whatever's, it's a fun way to start the thing, and
I'm an American. We don't know what's up in Canada. As far as we know, it's the land of maple syrup and magic. So there's camels.
I mean, there is magic, and we do have maple syrup. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you about that. But Josh, buddy, it's always good to do these with you. It's the only time I really get to podcast with you, aside from maybe once in a blue moon on the Hodder Show. So I
still need to get you on for Aiden Chronicles, but
yeah, I still haven't. Listen, I'm going to make a plea right now to the listeners of the Still Loading podcast. Guys, listen, we need to make this happen. As of right now, if you go to www.booktjonstillloadingpodcast.com, I'm even going to use the .com here, we will make this happen for a low fee of only $376 per month. You can help
that
support
very
this
real
cause.
Website.
No, but it's always fun to get to do this with you, man. And I'm so glad that we're still doing this now. When did we start doing this? Like 2019?
Yeah, I'd have to look back.
I am looking back right
2021, now. At least. Maybe 2020. I don't know, dude. We've been doing it for a while, though.
It feels like we've been doing it way longer, but maybe not.
I mean, I'd have to double check. I mean, I'm looking right now, and I think the last one I had with you was we did do one in 2021. That's when I made you watch that Mario World Christmas special.
You sure did.
Cave Christmas.
Yeah,
we did a 2021 we did a 2020 retrospective. So that's at least that. So maybe at least 2020. I'll have to double check to see if there's a 2019, but there was definitely a 2021. And actually, no, we did a 2019 one as well. So
we did somewhere. I can't find it, but I'm sure we did one.
No, I see it on my feed. Yeah. So we've been doing this for like 4 years at the very least. Yeah, we've known each other for a while. So welcome back, my friend. It's fun always catching up on here, and we chat a decent amount outside of it. Honestly, I've actually spoken to you more than some of my friends that I grew up with in high school, believe it or not. So it's always fun to be able to actually podcast together. And listeners, I mean, one of the cool things from this year, my show has grown a lot. So listeners, TJ was one of the first people that I ever met through podcasting. I figured I should at least give a little intro for my new listeners as to who you are. You're the host of the Hodder Show, and also you are working on a new project, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about. I'm assuming,
Yes.
right? You're
Oh
planning on
yeah.
talking about it. Um, you are the host of the Hodder Show, which is like you do kind of like I always describe Still Loading as a video game grab bag podcast, and I kind of describe your show as kind of like it's focused a lot on music, but it's a grab bag podcast as well, but just kind of like anything that interests you. You do a lot of interviews and music talk and wrestling and a little bit of everything. Like you really cover a wide gamut of topics, you know?
I really do. And, my, like when anyone asks, my bread and butter is interviews. That's what I've always done. I do a lot of unsigned and local bands, but then also I love interviewing creators like
Mhm.
yourself or other, other creators out there, regardless of whatever they do. So I like to do that a lot. But then also, I have things like I'll do almost like more blog like stuff. I'll do like an Ask Hodder Anything,
Mhm.
which they've gotten very popular this year, actually, all things considered. And then I
Hmm.
do, things like I'll have like, I have a segment on the show I do called The Albums That Made Me, which is me basically almost like kind of doing like a love letter to a specific album that I love. I also do some narration-y type stuff in the horror
Yeah, that's what
world.
you've been getting into
And
recently.
yes, I have. So I do. That's kind of a good way to put it. Is it's kind of a grab bag of a bunch of stuff that interests me, and I don't have one focus, which has also always kind of sort of held me back. But that's okay because I have fun with it. So that's what's most
And
important to me.
that's the most important thing. So yeah.
Mhm.
And listeners, what we usually do for this is kind of like our one episode of the year where TJ and I allow ourselves to pat ourselves on the back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, good job, me. I did that
Good
thing.
job, me. Take
Look
that,
at that.
feet.
Shake while this whole conversation's happening, I'm just shaking my own hand. Good job, you. But yeah, we just take a look back on it. We take a look back at our year of podcasting. Those TJ, I know you had a lot of personal stuff going on, so your podcasting was a little bit more limited than in previous years,
Mhm.
which is okay. We're still going to talk about it. We usually go through what our most popular episodes were. We rank them. I don't know. Did we do top 5 or top 10? I was thinking top 10. Like what
We
our
always
top
do
10
top
most
10.
that's
Yeah.
what I thought. Yeah. So we do our top 10 most downloaded episodes that came out this year. I always think it's kind of cool. I'll shout out the guests on those episodes because they're all my guests are wonderful, but I want to make sure I shout out the ones who really who helped make those episodes special. Clearly, because they did well for me. So we do that. We kind of talk about like things that we've thought went well this year, things that we thought didn't go well, things that we want to improve on. And this year we have a Q&A. I polled literally just this morning. I polled a bunch of people on Twitter and on Threads and Instagram and my Discord and everything like that. And yeah, we had a bunch of people who asked a bunch of questions, so we'll do that as well, and then we'll wrap it up with talking about what our plans are going forward. Like, what's a goal for each of our respective podcasts that we want to see going forward. So I guess TJ, talk a little bit about your year in podcasting this year. Like, you had a lot of personal stuff going on. You had to step away for the first time. I think for the first time ever, you took like a couple months off, right?
I did. Basically, long story short, for the new listeners of the Still Loading podcast, I tend to ramble a lot. So I'm going to try and be on my best behavior for once
It's a
and not
podcast. If
ramble
it's
too
not,
much.
it's built for rambling.
Oh, sure, of course. But for me this year, I took I think it was about 3, 4 months off, give or take. It was only supposed to be 1 month while I actually went on my honeymoon. I went away
Mm.
for about 2.5 weeks, and I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna podcast in that time frame." But also, to be honest, I was a little burnt out from it, so I was like, "Let me take a month off, then I'll come back, swing in, and have fun and all that stuff." And when I got back from the honeymoon, some work related stuff happened, kind of causing me to just have to be like, "Yeah, there's no way I can focus on podcasting right now." So I ended up taking a couple of more months off. But in that time frame, my little Discord community kind of kept growing and kept things rolling for me, and my Patreon helped immensely
Mm-hmm.
as well in that time frame, and it did grow a little bit this year as well. I got a couple new patrons, which is always exciting. So even though I took a step away from the Hodder Show, doing things like the excuse me, the show I have on my Patreon, I kept that going just because it's very different from the Hodder Show, and my patrons really love it. So I made sure to still do that for
What is
them.
that show? Just to, hopefully you can get you some more patrons as well. What
Yeah,
is that
so I
bonus
do
show?
a horror narration podcast for my
Mm,
Patreon called Tapes of Trepidation, and it's something that really grew a lot this year. This time last year, I talked about it a little bit because I had started doing it, but it has grown immensely this year, um, to the point where there's some of my patrons that, to be quite honest with you, they don't listen to the Hodder Show. They just want to listen to Tapes of Trepidation. If I'm being brutally honest, that's the reality. It's not that they don't like the Hodder Show, just they may not be interested in everything that I cover.
yeah.
They listen to the grab bag episodes where I do like, they listen to like the more bloggy type stuff. Or if there's a creator on that they really love or something like that, or something that interests them, they'll listen to that. But there's a couple of them that I know for a fact that they just want to listen to the horror podcast. Like that's the reality of the
Yeah.
situation. So I wanted to make sure I still kept that going. And then I did uh, start to get more into the voice acting world, which is something that, again, I did talk about a little bit last year, uh, but it really grew immensely to the point where I had the most roles that I've had uh, ever this year.
That's awesome.
The podcast that everyone should check out is called Baseline Feed. Some dear friends of mine who are also extremely talented. It is a audio drama podcast. It's not specifically horror or specifically just drama or whatever. They kind of do a bit of everything.
Mhm.
Um, Definitely check it out. Their season 3 is absolutely spectacular, and you're going to see me pop up a couple of times with some pretty big roles, to be honest. Actually, as this comes out, there's an episode that you guys should definitely go check out if you want to support me and support Baseline Feed, of course. It is called Exit 95, and it is one of my proudest pieces of work I think I've ever done,
Mm.
just strictly because of my performance on it. And because it was kind of a bit of a last minute thing where, they had someone fall through. So they ended up asking me if I would jump in. And I loved the story so much that it was just like kind of a match made in heaven for what I like to do on Tape for Trepidation. It's a little more my speed, but there's some really cool stuff happening with that. So I definitely implore you all to go check out Baseline Feed. Um, but to go back for a second, obviously my honeymoon was such a big deal for me. We ended up driving
Oh yeah, we
20.
did start
Yeah.
this as to like why the break happened, and then I was like,
Yes,
"What
I
is that
kind of,
bonus
yeah, I
show?"
got a little
No, no,
sidetracked,
no.
but
But that, I mean, that was interesting to me. And baseline feed, it's like BASELINE, right? That's how you spell baseline. Just to
yes,
be clear. All
Baseline.
right,
Yeah.
just wanted to double check. Sorry, continue. Yes, you had your honeymoon though.
Yes. So we ended up driving. Here's something fun for you. So we ended up driving to the as Josh mentioned, I am from Canada. I live in Ontario,
The Great White
Southern
North.
Ontario, Southern. So I'm in like the southern-ish part of Canada. Um, we ended up driving to the east coast of Canada, which is about a 24 hour drive.
Dear Lord,
We drove straight through both times because we're insane. Um,
why would you do that to yourself?
oh, dude, you don't even know it. So
If you
then we ended up,
survive that, your marriage was meant to last forever.
okay. So listen to this. So we, not only did we drive 24 straight hours, like to get to the ferry to take us to Newfoundland, which is another part of Canada. Um, but we drove all the way there, sat in the parking lot for like 6 hours, got on a ferry, which we had to sit in what is basically the equivalent of airplane seats for 8 hours in a super hot room, just sitting there staring at each other because neither of us could sleep. Then We get off that and drive another 6 hours to our hotel.
Oh my God.
Um,
Was it
yeah,
worth it?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Dude, I hadn't slept that good in years. We
I believe it.
got to the hotel and just crashed. It was beautiful. Newfoundland is such a beautiful place. I it was just, I mean, I can sit here and probably talk about it for the whole podcast, but like in short, we had a really wonderful trip. We were there for about a week, drove all over the place in Newfoundland, then got back on the ferry for 18 hours this time.
Why was it so
Luck
much longer?
because we were at the other end of Newfoundland.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, so to get back to where we originally were in Nova Scotia, which is where we were before, it was a 18-hour ferry ride, or was it 16 hours? Whatever. It was
Either
at
way,
least 16 hours.
that's over half a day.
Yeah. So we ended up, we got a cabin, luckily, so we could at least sleep. So it was way more enjoyable. But yeah, we may or may not have had some THE and went to a buffet
Mhm.
and then went to sleep for a little while. So it was great. But the one thing that did happen while I was there in regards to podcasting, I guess not so much podcasting, but creativity. It really made me realize how much I need I need creativity in my life, not
Yeah.
just with my voice acting and my writing and the horror stuff and whatnot, but also with the Hodder Show, because by the time I got to the point where I recorded my first interview to come back, which I will talk about a little later, I was just jonesing for it. I was like, I need this so badly because I missed it so much. And
Mhm.
I'm going to talk a little bit later about something that I really am proud of this year. And one of the things, I'll spoiler alert, I really feel like I found my love for podcasting again. Not that I didn't love it this whole time, but I really rediscovered why I started doing this in the first place.
Mm.
And that's a really cool thing. And as I head into next year, we'll talk a little later on about some things we have going on for next year. And I'm doing something huge next year that is going to be potentially pretty not life changing as far as my life outside of podcasting, but as far as my world in podcasting, it's going to be life changing.
Mhm.
So yeah, little sneak peek for that topic in a little bit here. But I have rambled on long enough. Josh, walk me through some highlights for you this year, my friend, because you had a killer year this year.
It's been a year, my friend. This year had a lot of ups and downs, mostly ups though. A lot of times when people say ups and downs, they generally mean there's something bittersweet coming at the end. Like the end of the year was really tough, not for the podcast, but in my personal life. And I don't know if it affected the podcast per se, but some of my later episodes, some of my episodes over the last couple months, I think they all turned out pretty well, but there's been a lot of stuff in my personal life going on behind the scenes that has made it made the end of the year. I might have been a little bit more distracted. I think some of the other episodes though have turned out better than I was expecting, so I'm not too worried about it. But for the vast majority of the year though, it's been a wonderful year, man. It really has been. I this year, I think more than anything, I've gotten feedback from my audience, like more feedback from my audience this year than the previous. And I think I might have said something like that during last year's episode as well, where I was getting more feedback. Well, it's even more this year. And I've been getting some very nice compliments from people talking about how much they enjoy the show, that it's their comfort show, and that's made me feel really good. It's I mean, I do the podcast because I like to talk about video games, but it's also really nice and really it keeps the fire going when when you hear those nice things. So it really meant a lot to me. So that was awesome. It's been awesome watching my kid grow over the last year. She is amazing. She'll be 3 soon, which just doesn't seem possible.
I can't believe that, dude. That's wild.
Yeah, it's funny. I was telling you off mic that before I came up to record, she was still awake. And normally I record when she's asleep. But with this, because of our schedule and everything, I actually could record this during the daytime, so she's still awake. And she asked to come up to record with me because she knows, like, oh, daddy does a podcast. She doesn't know what a podcast is, but it's something that daddy does, so she wants to be a part of it. It's really cute. So it's been a really good year on a personal level. Both my wife and I are doing great. Like, everything for the vast majority of the year has been like just awesome, like on a personal note. It's just only been the last couple months there's been some stress, but even then my wife and I are figuring stuff out. And just to be clear, that made it sound like it's marital issues. My marriage is fine, I swear, we're fine. Actually,
Clarify that.
well, and it's funny, we're recording this, the episode doesn't drop. The episode before this, my wife is on the episode, so
Ooh,
uh
that's always a treat.
yeah, I always remember you saying you enjoyed that Stardew Valley episode I did with
Dude,
her back in
I
2020.
still think I don't remember what it was she said during the episode, but she had a one-liner that I was like, dude, like she needs a podcast. I remember saying to you, like, I will do all the work. Just get her in front of a microphone at least once a week and just
I
record
told her I'm in the process of editing our episode as at the time we're recording this, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, she really could be a podcaster. She was
100%.
like, I could tell she's a little nervous, but still, but she doesn't podcast all that often, so I get it. But like, even through those nerves, I can hear it, and I think that she could totally do a podcast. She's not into gaming, but it's, she could do it on whatever she wants. But yeah, so this year's just been a really good year on a personal note. um it just it everything with the pot. Oh, how could I freaking forget this, dude? At the beginning of the year, I think you saw, yeah, I sent it to you and you saw it. My show got mentioned in Screen Rant as one of the top 10 podcasts for history
Yes,
nerds.
dude.
I could not believe that. I like absolutely could not believe that. The first episode of the year was an episode I did on Japanese feature phone games, which was, for those who don't remember, feature phone games were like, or feature phones are like flip phones basically, and the phones in Japan were super advanced compared to what we had here in the States. So it was really cool to learn about it. And that episode, by the way, did not make the top 10 of most downloaded episodes, but I figured it was number 19. I'll give it that. I'll say that it was number 19 for the year. But I think that episode, the reason I bring that up in regards to the article I got on, was because they referenced that episode specifically. And I think if I had not done that episode, I don't think I would have made it on the list. Additionally, the person who pointed out to me that I was on the list was my guest for that episode, Rockman Cosmo. And when he first sent it to me, I'm like, oh, come on, don't do this to me. Like, don't fake an article just to, like, I didn't think it was like an actually to be mean or anything like that, but I just thought, just, playing around, having fun, that kind of thing. And then it was real. And I still am in shock, man. Like, I genuinely am in shock that it showed up there. So I thought that was awesome. It was one of the coolest things to happen to the show. And that was the beginning of the year. I found out about that in like late January, early February. And it really felt like this year in general took off. So this is, I think, I say this with no hyperbole. I think this was my favorite and best year that I've done the podcast. And I'm so excited for 2024, dude. I don't know what plans I have for 2024. I have a few ideas. But like, I started the year off with this whole Winter of Final Fantasy thing, which was great. And that's going to be part of the things that we talk about a little bit later in some of the Q&A. But that like, I started off with like this little series, and then I did Mario Month again, and I had a couple other like big, like, kind of not really mini series per se. It was like back-to-back episodes that were connected in some way, shape, or form. So this year, I think more than anything was the year of the series. And also I guested on so many podcasts this year. So, man, like, I was counting, I think I counted for my, I told my wife, I was like, do you know how many I've been on? And she wasn't sure. I counted, I want to say, if I remember correctly, it was like 30. I made like 30 guest spots
Jeez.
throughout the year. Like, it was a busy year for both my show and for guesting. So, I don't know if I'll be able to continue to do that as time goes on, but we'll see. But yeah, it's just been a good year, dude. Like I don't know how many other ways I can say it. It's been a really nice year, and I'm just so grateful for my listeners, man. Like I've really felt the love this year, and when times have gotten hard, especially in this last half of the year, it's meant the world to me. Just the kind words that I've read, and the you mentioned before your Patreon grow. Mine grew as well this year. I was very surprised to see it grow, and because of like it growing, I actually let me think. This I think for the entire year, I did my whole still bonding thing. I think when we last recorded, when we did our thing last year, I had started doing the still bonding show for the $5 patrons, and that's still going. You know, like the time this episode comes out, License to Kill is the most recent one. GoldenEye is coming out. Actually, at the time we're recording this, I'm recording the GoldenEye episode tomorrow night, so that one is already in the in the plan. So it's been a lot of fun, and I already have plans for the next kind of movie series I do for the $5 patrons, and it's going to be, I think, I don't want to announce it just yet what it is. Maybe I've said it before, but just in case, I don't want to announce it because I don't know if I'm definitely going to do it or not. But it's I have another movie franchise that I want to tackle, and I'm really looking forward to it. So for yeah, still bonding's just been awesome. So between the article, the Patreon has like not exploded, but grown a lot, both in terms of people who have joined it as well as the amount of content I'm putting out over there that's exclusive for it. And then just the kind words, man. Like, I don't know. Like I said before, I'm always nervous to talk about this stuff because I never want it to sound like I'm coming off as like, look at this, look how, like, congratulate me. Meh. I don't mean it that way. It's just this, like I said, this is our victory lap that we take once a year. It's kind of nice to look back and just see what you have accomplished and what you could do better. And actually, you know what? And speaking of things that I want to do better with, I really want to find ways to come up with more series ideas. Like I with my Winter of Final Fantasy or my Mario month, where I have a themed batch of episodes. And it's just like a little series that I do like 3 or 4 in a row, all the same theme. And I really enjoyed doing that, and I think it's a good way to help market the show. I've seen huge number growth, especially because of the way I advertise it. I create like original, like I do a like little thumbnail art for like the Winter of Final Fantasy. I did that for Mario, or for Mario month. I did that this year, and spoiler alert, those episodes really they all landed in the top 10. The Winter of Final Fantasy and all of Mario month is in the top 10. Like I've never seen that happen before. So I really think like kind of what I've been doing with these like little mini like I guess series, but just correlated episodes, I really think people have enjoyed, and I enjoy doing them because it makes it feel like this bigger project, you know?
Absolutely. I actually, that's something I forgot to mention for myself too. Like where, I tried a couple of different things and they're, well, at least one of them is in my top 10 this year as well. So I think that's cool that you're still trying things and that your goal, something you want to improve on is to keep building those, because that's one thing that I loved about your podcast when I first heard it, was that you do a series of things. I know at the time that was the 40 for 40, so it was a little different,
Yeah.
but I love that you do that because it gives people a reason to tune in for the next episode more, and then they just end up, being like, well, this not only is this guy covering content I want to hear in a type of a series, but
Mhm.
then they can be like, hey, he's also like very knowledgeable and witty and funny, and like I want to listen to this guy more.
Well, I don't
I
know
think
about
that's a
those
great
other
way
parts.
to.
I pretend to be funny, and some people politely laugh, but you know,
I pretend to be funny. Hey man, fake it till you make it.
that's the best way to do it. And you brought up one other thing too, or you reminded me, I should say, of one other thing too that I was happy with. I brought back the Final Fantasy Draft. I did that in 2022, and it was super popular. And I brought it back again this year over the summer, and I'm going to start doing it annually. There's going to be an annual Final Fantasy draft, and I might try to change up some rules, but at the very least, I change up guests so that way you get a different flavor of the draft every single year. So, and who knows, maybe one year when there's enough winners crowned, because we had this year I had people vote on who won the draft. And I created like a little like Google form for people to go to, and they could vote on who had the best draft and who pitched the best Final Fantasy that they drafted. And it was so much fun, man. It was I'm so happy with how that turned out, and it's only going to get better next year. In the process of like trying to figure out who I want to be on it, but it might be just a summer thing. It might be every summer there's a new Final Fantasy draft, and I should probably start planning who the guests are early this year, because it does take a little bit to set up, because there's a bunch of different people and schedules we have to balance. But yeah, but I think this is a good segue, my friend, into our top 10s. Like what our top 10 episodes in terms of download numbers of the year were, and then maybe if you can think of it, like what was your personal favorite episode that you did this year? Not saying all the others were bad, of course, but just your personal favorite, and we'll go from there. So, TJ, I want to throw it over to you. What was your number 10? Like, what was your 10th most popular episode this year?
So my 10th most popular episode this year was actually I'll read the whole title here. I called it a Hodder Show creepypasta. I started a podcast, but I only recorded 30 episodes. And I have to quickly explain it. So basically, in a nutshell, for my 8th year anniversary this year, mainly again for my patrons and for my Discord community, I decided to do something really silly and fun, where I wrote what is called a creepypasta, which is basically an internet horror story that can be loose, and it doesn't have to be a traditional storytelling, and you can do whatever you want. A lot of them are based in a lot of different silly things. So I decided to write one about the podcast, because I had this really silly idea where I was like, yo, I almost stopped doing the podcast around right at episode 30, because I did a live podcast for my 30th episode. And in this timeline, so to speak, I basically had such a terrible time doing it that I quit after episode 30.
Okay.
But the podcast kept going. Episodes kept being posted, but they weren't being posted by me.
Oh,
so it
that's
was
a
like,
cool idea for a creepypasta.
I was like,
it.
It was like, you know what? So someone's posting and it's not me, but it's people are like, dude, what do you mean? It's your voice. I see you doing it. You're posting it. Like, what are you talking about? But it's like, basically in this timeline, in this character is me basically pleading with people, like, do not listen to this. This is not me. Like, and then it's like, okay, what would I hear when I tuned into it then? Well, all I hear is screaming, and all I see is myself looking at the camera smiling.
But no one else can see
no
that
one else can
except
see
for
that.
you.
Yes.
God, that's scary. That's good.
So I was like, I thought it was such a silly little idea. I wrote it in like 5 minutes. And when there wasn't really much to write, it was mostly ad-libbed on the spot. And I recorded it the next day, edited it, and threw it up. And it's my 10th most downloaded episode, because I did it for the Patreon show, but then I made it public because I was like, this is kind of a fun little thing. And my horror narration-y type stuff always does well when I'm shocked this one was in my top 10. Now, mind you, my top 10 all includes YouTube, my old podcast hosting site, and then my new podcast hosting site. So, some of them, it's almost like I'm cheating because I'm adding up 3 things. But that's why I was shocked that this one was in the top 10. I was like, wow, But looking back on it, it was a lot of fun.
And dude, it's actually kind of prescient thinking about it with all the concerns over AI. So like your podcast stops and people hear your voice still, but that's fucking terrifying.
Well, and that's the thing is like, so when I did it, someone asked me like, so like, is it AI? And I'm like, well, that's kind of what you think at first until I talk about like, so then what do I hear when I tune in? Well, all I hear is me screaming. Just that's it. me screaming, and then I see and then I listen to a video and it's just me looking at the camera smiling in a horrifyingly creepy way, and it's like, hey guys, I don't know what this means, but I know it's not good, so don't listen to it, don't share it. Basically everything you say to do with a podcast. Don't subscribe, don't share it, don't like it, don't listen to it, don't rate it. Like, I
And
don't
of
want
course it
anyone else
takes
to hear
off.
this. And of course, yeah, in this timeline, it's super
And
successful.
then yeah.
So it's like, that's a fun little joke at myself. But yeah, so that was I had to kind of explain that because I know it was a little convoluted.
No,
But
but
yeah,
that's a
that was my
really
number 10. And it was a lot of
and
fun to do.
And you know what? I was going to say we should go back and forth, but I think it'd be nicer to get an overall feel for our respective audiences, like what, because the people who listen to our podcast, I feel like it's more interesting if we can hear our top tens like back to back to back to back. So like,
Sure.
go up to your number 9 and just work
I'll
your way up
run
to your
through
number
here.
1.
So my number 9 is called Ask Sam Anything. Sam is my wife. And
What
I'm not shocked this one's on the top 10, because when I told my Discord community, who a lot of them, I shouldn't say they're fascinated by my wife, but like, she's not around. She's not into the podcast world. She's been on the podcast a handful of times, but we did this format a couple of years ago and she actually really enjoyed it because it's very loose and it's very just, it's not me interviewing her. It's just her answering questions people ask, because you can have a lot of fun with it. And I had I think I had like 40 questions to ask her. I didn't ask all of them because there was just no way, but it was the second biggest response I've ever gotten from when I announced something on Discord. It was like, holy shit, Sam's coming on the podcast. So it was a lot of fun. I always love whenever I get to record with my wife. It's so much fun. And she doesn't give herself a lot of credit for being entertaining, but she's always entertaining and we always have fun banter and things of that nature. So,
I mean, who doesn't love having their wife on just kind of mocking you and I don't mean that as an insult to Sam, but it's amusing from the listener perspective to hear the host just kind of like have someone who's more willing to like belittle them
take
a
the
little
piss out of them.
bit. Yeah,
Because she does and she does not. Like, that's the thing is, like,
it's funny.
To the people who listen to the Hodder Show and the people who are the reason this is in the top 10, my diehard, so to speak, they know who I am. They know I'm, they're not any, they know I'm like a real human being and everything. But like, I think for some people, it's like, you think about these people who you listen to and they're always on, so to speak, when you're talking to them, even on Discord. Like, I try to always be on, so to speak, but then you're getting in that situation and it's like, oh, this is just him talking to his wife, and his wife isn't going to put up with his shit. His wife hears these same stories 100 times. She knows who he really is as a human being. So she'll call him on his shit and whatnot. And, not that because I don't say anything like that, but like, it can be really interesting when you get people who are around you in your everyday life all the time in an environment like that, where they're like, oh yeah, like you're a quote unquote personality. I hate using that word, but
yeah, because you try to be as like I can't speak for you, but I feel like we both are on the same page with this, where we try to be as authentic to ourselves as we can when you're on the show. But like, you do have a podcasting voice, and you do speak in a slightly different cadence than when you are speaking in person. But it's I try to be as authentic as I can with mine, but I think having your significant other on, whether it's your wife or whomever, it does kind of help add to that, like kind of bring you down a little bit, like take you down a notch. Remind you're not just some personality on a mic.
It's like, oh, you're a real human being and your wife's on and she's telling a story that you probably wouldn't tell yourself on the podcast or something.
She fucking
like that,
hates
right?
your guts. No.
Yeah. It's like, or, the fact that she's like, oh, cool, you're you're doing voice acting and stuff, like, that's cool. By the way, you forgot to do the dishes last night. Like, no.
And it still smells bad.
Yeah, it's just like, it's just like, it's cool to have that. I'm making it sound like she's super, super supportive and loves that. But actually, on the day that we recorded this, I actually had her record lines for something for the horror podcast. And she had never done anything like that before and wasn't for it at all. But then she did it anyway because it was actually my birthday. And then I was like, give me a second. And I edited it up and I showed it to her. And she was like, that's me. I'm like, yeah. She's like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. I was like, right? Like, do you get it? And she was kind of like, I get it now. Like, I understand why you love this so much. So that was also kind of cool. But yeah, Ask Sam Anything number 9, not shocked at all that it's on here. My number 8 was what I am calling exclusive first listen, which is when a band gives me the rights to play. Well, I use the term rights loosely. Obviously, it's, they're pals. I get the worldwide exclusive to let people hear something for the first time. And I did that twice this year, and it's the first time I ever did it. And this episode was, the band is called Seagrave. They're good friends of mine. Awesome beatdown metal band. Killer stuff if you're into heavy music. Their self-titled EP, we got to hear it in full, like I think it was 2 or 3 weeks early. And then they gave us some exclusive behind the scenes stories and talked about the recording process and that. So that was killer. Also, I have to shout out, we did one earlier in the year with one of their singles, Onslaught, which was also awesome. It wasn't in my top 10, but it was close. So I wanted to give that a shout out. So that was my number 8. Number 7 was actually as we're recording this, the last episode I put up, my last interview of the year with Adam Baldwin from Flesh Guzzler. That's right, Flesh Guzzler. The heaviest name,
dude.
And he is an absolutely sweetheart gem of a guy. And it's so funny because his music is just brutal. Like it's full on blackened death metal. Like it's just brutal. But yeah, really good stuff. It was a great conversation. It was actually the first video interview I did in a while. I ended up using the video for a couple different reasons, which I will actually talk about in a little bit, because one of the reasons was something funny that happened this year. But yeah, it was a great conversation. His fans really came out for it. They loved hearing what he had to say. So again, not shocked that it was on my in my top 10 there. It was a really fun conversation. My number 7 was from Ali from Seagrave. Seagrave's in here twice, I just realized. That episode was a long time in the making. I'd known Ali since my days working at the music store. And he had never been on the podcast. So, I mean, that was a great interview because I literally asked him a question, and then because he had been wanting to come on for so long, he had everything fully prepared to talk about. So I basically he just told me his story for an hour and a half, and I was like, cool, I think we're done here. I didn't really have to, I didn't have to do much to kind of guide the conversation, because I think it's just because
that's the best, man.
So much.
It's so part of me feels like I should be talking more, but then I'm like, no, they're here for the guest. The guest is the one telling the story. If you can just let them go, oh my gosh, it's wonderful.
And that was exactly what I wanted out of that. And I knew it was going to be that way, because I was like, again, it had been 8 years in the making. So it was going to be what it was. But that was a really fun conversation as well. My number 5 was my conversation with my buddy Matt Lane, who is a solo artist, also a podcaster in his own right. That was really fun. He is actually going to be playing his final show ever fairly soon. So it was fun getting to catch up with him and kind of talk the state of the music industry in a post-COVID world and all that. And it was a really great conversation. And he's had a lot of changes. It was
kind of heavy too.
It was, yeah. He's had a lot of changes happen in his life too, for the better. We had a really heavy conversation. I think it was a year or 2 years ago. And that was kind of the last time we heard from him. It was a beautiful conversation, but it was really dark and heavy. And so to have him back on he's in such a wonderful place. And it was just great to kind of almost bring that full circle. It was a really fun, positive conversation. My only quarrels with it was that I accidentally used my webcam mic for the whole thing. So it sounds like ass on my end, but that's okay. And that's actually happened twice with him, by the way. So every time he comes on, I apparently forget how to use audio. So shout outs to my boy Matt. His podcast, A Chat with Matt, is coming back. So stay tuned for that, folks. My number 4 was my chat with actor extraordinaire Eric Phones, who is a very talented voice actor. Also, was a actor who had a couple of roles that he did back in the day. Eric's a dear friend of mine, also a patron. So it was great getting to chat with him. He's a wonderful dude. Eric knows how much I love him. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it for 10 minutes or anything. But it was a great conversation. We really dove deep into his work as a horror actor for the movie Carver, which was a very intense role for him. So we kind of got to get inside his head and be like, how'd you get in the character for this when you're just like, straight up murdering people and things of that nature? We also talked a lot about why he wanted to get into voice acting and how he gets into a certain role for his voice acting and everything. So definitely a great conversation. A lot of the baseline feed crew, their fan base and his fan base came out for that. So not surprised at all that it was on here in the number 4 spot. Shout out to my buddy Eric. My number 3, as we round down the list here, was my conversation with Dylan and Nick from Pneumonia Breath, who are a metalcore band.
Band names, dude.
Yeah, I know, right?
At least ammonia. Is it ammonia or
It's
like pneumonia?
it's Pneumonia Breath, or what did I say in the beginning of that episode? I was like Pneumonia Breath or some shit, and I was like, I'm leaving it in, screw it. And then they were like, yeah, we picked the dumbest band name, but whatever. But yeah, we had Seagrave, Flesh Guzzler, and then Pneumonia Breath. Yeah, it's a whole thing out there in the metal heavy music world. But these two guys were wonderful guests. It's one of my favorite interviews I did this year. They had quite a story to tell as well, because they were both in different bands before that were really popular here in my local area. So people were very curious to hear about their story, and I got to actually be the first person they talked to about their journey to this new band and their new EP they released. So that was great. And I was really honored that they chose me to be the person to give this story to talk about, because they could have chose someone else for sure. They could have chosen someone bigger, but they decided they wanted to go with me because
you've been repping the local Canada indie scene for a while, so I feel
almost 9 years.
Regardless of the size of the podcast, which I'm not saying yours is small, mind you, but regardless of podcast size, you've put in the work, man. You put in the work to do this.
I like to think I have some street cred, so to speak. I got to be cool for one night recently where me and the wife went to a metal show, actually at the venue where we got married at. I forgot to mention this in my highlights. What? So the venue we got married at, it's like a restaurant, and then there's like an event area above the restaurant.
Okay.
So there was a full-on heavy metal show at this restaurant above it in the room we got married in. Where our head table was where the bands were playing.
That's wild.
And it was some homies, so that was really cool. But as we're walking in, I was saying to Sam, there might be one person who recognizes me because they're buddies. So but no one's gonna fucking care. No one gives a shit who I am. It's fine. As we're walking up to the fucking thing, all I hear is that TJ Hodder from the Hodder Show? And it was homies. So it's not like a fan recognizes me or anything, but I ended up and then as we walked in, I ran into another band who I hadn't met all of them yet. So within the first 5 minutes that we were there, it was oh my God, it's TJ from the Hodder Show type shit for a second. And afterwards, she just looked at me. I was like, "Okay, we're done now. I promise. This is it." So I got to be cool again. But I like to think that with what I've done, it's earned me that little bit of almost not immediate respect, but I'm trying to figure out how to word this properly. There's some respect there for what I've done. I think, so I think that's why they decided to go with me. And also I had worked with Nick's band previously on something. So it was really cool to bring that full circle and get them to tell their story, because it's a wonderful, beautiful story of just, sometimes you let something you love go and then you can get back into it. So I definitely recommend that episode, not just if you're fans of the band or you're heavy music fans, but just for their story is really great. My number 2 was a conversation I had with a Canadian artist, Sierra Levesque, who is she's a young guitarist and singer, and she's fucking already like way more talented than probably 90% of the people out there, if I'm being honest. And she was wonderful. Great interview, very forthcoming with her story and very warm, and she has some great music. The sky's the limit for her. I think in like another 5 years she's going to be fucking all over the place. So Sierra Levesque, go check her out, support her. She's awesome. Definitely going to be getting her on again sometime. And then last but not least, my most downloaded episode by actually a lot,
A country mile,
by
as
a
they
pretty by a country mile,
by a country mile.
was well, I gotta get off Otis Cletus.
I was like, why are you still speaking that voice?
Cletus, I gotta damn Otis Cletus. Sorry, folks. Otis Cletus is a character on my Discord. What was I saying? Yes. Back to the seriousness for a second, because this was really cool to see. I didn't expect this, but my most downloaded episode is also my favorite episode that I did for the year, but I'll talk about that in a little bit after Josh gives us his top 10. I did a Halloween special, as I do every year now, of a narration of an original story. And the story was called The Last Time I Went Trick-or-Treating. And basically, very, very quick synopsis. Young man ends up going trick-or-treating for the first time on his own, which is going to be also his last year trick-or-treating. Ends up going to an area he probably shouldn't have, but it's fine. Everything goes well there. And as he's walking home, he sees this house that is fantastically decorated with music and everything. And there's a friendly old man on the porch. Ends up going inside with the old man, and shenanigans ensue.
That's
okay. And horror shenanigans. Not good. Paranormal, monster, demon stuff.
Ooh.
And it ended up doing quite well, and I was kind of shocked, but I'm really proud of my work on that. My voice work, my writing on it, I got a lot of really great compliments on from one of the compliments I got was that I really know how to pick stories for my voice. They were like, and whoever wrote this did an incredible job. I was blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, like, thank you. I wrote it. And the person who said it, like, they were like, wait, you're actually a really good writer. I was like, oh, thank you. Like, it's like, you're actually a good writer. I was like, thank you, ? But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And, provided what I'm going to be doing next year, this is a really good indication that I'm heading the right way with my creative career. As much as the Hodder Show is always going to be a thing, the fact that this is my top episode by quite a bit tells me that there's a lane out there for me in this world, I think. So yeah. The last time I went trick-or-treating was my number one downloaded episode of the year, and there's thousands I would love to give a shout out to for also doing well, but those are my top 10. So Josh, I have taken up enough time, my friend. Walk me through your top 10 downloaded episodes of the year.
So a lot of my episodes are actually from earlier in the year, but there were two that were the latest episodes that made it into the top 10 are from July, and the first of those two episodes from July is my number 10 episode 272, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors with Kate Gray. Kate is a games journalist, and I had her on for this because there was earlier in the year, there was this, aggregate list of the top 100 best games of all time. And the way they compiled the list was that they asked a whole bunch of people in the games press, like I'm talking like hundreds of people, and they all gave their own personal rankings of like 1 through 100 type of thing. On the list, she said like one of the ones she put up at the top of her list was this game, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. And I'm honestly surprised it made it into the top 10 because it's not like it's a well-known game, I would say. It's a visual novel. So I'm very surprised that this game made it in, or this episode, because it's on a game that not a lot of people talk about. I'm very surprised it made it into the top 10. So I was really happy to see that it did so well. Visual novels are something I haven't played a whole bunch of, but TJ, I thought you would find this game interesting if you ever get a chance to give it a shot. Because have you ever personally played like a visual novel type of game?
I haven't, but it's something that has always interested me, just because I do
Hmm.
love, you know, reading and things of that nature, obviously. So that would
Well,
be, I'd love to hear about it.
so without going too far into the plot of this, the basic overview is that you play as a character named Junpei who wakes up on this base. It's almost like a navy ship, like an ocean liner or something like that, and you're
Okay.
trapped inside this room and you have to figure out a way to get out of the room. It's kind of like a barracks type of thing, like a single cell barracks type of thing. And when you get out of the room and you like, you don't actually control the character. It's a visual novel, like I said. So the it's pretty much puzzles or the gameplay elements of it. You find out that there's a bunch of other people here also who have been somehow captured and woken up on this ship. And you find out that you there's someone speaking over the loudspeaker named Zero, who says that you are part of the Nonary games and you have to find a way to escape this ship in under 9 hours. And there's nine people, there's 9 hours to get out of here, and there's nine doors that you have to go through. But there's like some puzzle shenanigans on how to get through the doors, which I'm not going to go into all of that. But essentially, the puzzle shenanigans just determines which people can go through the doors and which people cannot, and you can use different combinations of people to solve the puzzles. So that's kind of where your choice in lies. If you go through the door and you don't, and when the door closes, you have like, I think it's like 30 seconds to find another scanner. And if you don't scan it, then the bomb that's been planted inside your stomach will explode. And everyone has a bomb inside their stomach. So you have to play through this game, figure out why you were taken, why everyone else was taken, what is going on, and how do you get out of here. It's a really interesting story. It's a really fun game. And I was just surprised to see it as my top 10 in the top 10 because, like I said, not a lot of people know about this game. It was originally on the DS, and visual novels are not a popular genre. So I was happy to see it at my number 10.
That's awesome. And it sounds cool. I've never like delved into that world, but it sounds like I might need to.
It's worth checking out. My
Put it
number
on the
9.
list.
Put it on.
Put it under the no.
One of the questions we get from the listeners at the Q&A segment is, what's a backlog game? There you go, TJ.
There you go.
There's a backlog for you. My number 9 is New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which was part of Mario Month. It was actually the third episode of Mario Month. That was with Jared from Play Along Podcast and Chazzy from the Side Project Podcast. And what a fun, amazing episode. That episode actually kind of, wow, it's wild how this works out. So in that episode, I forget how it came up, but I talk about the movie The Wizard because it was how The Wizard is how Mario Brothers 3 was first announced here in North America. Like, people saw it and you could see gameplay of it. And it was a movie that came out in 89, and it was meant to like be a summer film that showed off Super Mario Brothers 3 to the general public before people in North America had seen it. And Chazzy and Jared were like really intrigued by this. And, I don't really need to go too much more into talk about New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It's a Mario game. We've played a bunch of Mario games. But what's funny is we made plans on that episode to be like, all right, I'm going to have you all back later in the year and we're going to do an episode on The Wizard. Well, guess which episode is number 8 on my list? The Wizard from 1989. So they're literally back to back. Jared did come back for that. Chazzy, he could not. His schedule got too busy. But joining me on it was Stefan Reese from the Art of Nintendo Power. He's known as the Art of Nintendo Power on Twitter and on Instagram and a lot of on social media. He runs like a charity that preserves video game art and stuff and ephemera and stuff like that. And by art, I mean the original pieces of art that were used for like magazine covers and shit like that. Like he has like the original paintings and the original pieces that were done by the artist that eventually got used. Like it's really cool. So he's been on the show a handful of times. He was on for some of the Captain N episodes. Dude, I totally forgot to bring Captain N up in my end of the year retrospective. I've been doing that series for 2.5 years. I'll shout that out at the end of my top 10. But I'm so sorry, Dexter. That was one of my favorite things to do. We just wrapped up that series as well, literally this month. Um, but anyway, sorry. So yes, I had Jared back on for the Wizard. I had Stefan Reese from AKA Art of Nintendo Power, and who he runs the Art of Nintendo Power exhibit. They were on to discuss the Wizard, and dude, what a wild ride! Like we laughed so hard on that episode. There was so many goofy moments that happened. It was great. It was one of my favorite ones to record. Not my favorite, but one of my favorites for sure. Um, Moving up to, let's see, 10, 9, 8, we're up to 7 now. Back to Mario month, it is Super Mario Galaxy 2. And that episode featured my buddy Dan Greenberg from Winter Ion Games. It's a YouTube channel, as you can find him, Winter Ion. Like it almost looks like Winterian, but it's actually supposed to be two words, Winter Ion. So Winter Ion on Twitter and Blue Sky and Instagram and all that good stuff. Mario Galaxy 2, it was a really fun episode. So Mario month this year focused on a lot of the 3D games. It was Mario Galaxy. It in total covered New Super Mario Brothers for the DS. It covered New Super Mario Brothers Wii. It covered the two Galaxy games, Galaxy 1 and 2. So while Super Mario Galaxy 2 was number 7, number 6 was the original Super Mario Galaxy, right back to back once again. Even though they weren't back to back episodes, they were. It's funny that Galaxy 1 got the spot higher. And that episode, I had on my buddy Eric Guess from the podcast Unlockables, and also I had on my friend Chris, also known as the British Bond Addict on Instagram. And that was such a great episode. I love having Chris has been on a bunch of times and Eric has been on a bunch of times. They're both such great guests. And I really think I mentioned before I was happy with the series that I did. And I think Mario Month was so successful this year because I had such a great cast of guests between um, Dan and Cosmo and Chris and Eric and Chazzy and Jared. And the actually number 5 is New Super Mario Brothers. So like the entirety of Mario Month is in take up 4 of the spots in the top 10, and they take up spot 5, 6, 7, and 9 in the top 10. And for the New Super Mario Brothers episode for the DS one, that was with Try from My Life in Gaming. God, I just love that episode. Try is such a great guest on any podcast episode that he's on. I love having him on. I want to have him on again. But are you a fan of any of these Mario games, man?
I'll be brutally honest with you, brother. I haven't played a single one so far. I'm not. I'm not much of a gamer anymore.
I know you had that gaming podcast and then you fell out of it.
Yeah, I'm very selective, but also like I don't have like the only Nintendo system I
You don't
still
have
use at
time.
all is like the N64. So yeah.
Well, you should check out actually a fellow Canadian. Shout out to my buddy Dave over at Remember 64, Dave Petrangelo.
Ooh.
You can check out his podcast. He's covering all N64 games. So Remember 64. So
Okay.
he's a good dude. Check out his stuff. But yeah, so number 5 was New Super Mario Bros. So just to recap real quick, because I feel like I've been doing a lot of quick transitions. So number 10, 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors with Kate Gray. Number 9, New Super Mario Bros. Wii with Chazzy and Jared. Chazzy from Side Project and Jared from Play Along Podcast. The number 8, The Wizard, with Jared, once again, from Play Along Podcast, and Stefan Reese from The Art of Nintendo Power. Number 7 is Super Mario Galaxy 2 with Dan Greenberg from Winter Ion and Rockman Cosmo from the Japanese feature phone preservation project that he's been working on. Number 6 is Super Mario Galaxy with Eric from The Unlockables and Chris, the British Bond Addict, on Twitter or Instagram, excuse me. And number 5 is New Super Mario Bros. DS with Try from the YouTube channel My Life in Gaming. So we're moving into the top 4 now. And Try makes an appearance. Try from My Life in Gaming is back again at number 4 with my episode on Final Fantasy VIII. This was the second episode of the Winter of Final Fantasy series that we did. And dude, I love that series. I love it so much. I'm so proud of that. It was just so much fun to do because it was a big undertaking for me. And I'll explain why because it might come up a little bit later. You'll see why. So Try comes in at number 4 with Final Fantasy VIII. Also, I'm so sorry. My good friend Bill Barber from the Gaming and Collecting podcast also guested on that episode, and he will appear later on in this list. Absolutely fantastic episode. I was so happy with it. The number, see, and this is where I'm not quite sure what to do with this. So number 3 is Final Fantasy VII, and the reason I say I'm not quite sure, it's because it could actually be swapped. Not swapped, but it could actually be up to number 2, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So to clarify this, to help clarify this a little bit further, Final Fantasy VII is number 3. Number 2 is my Pokemon Gen 1 episode. And then number 1 is Final Fantasy IX. And the reason why I say there's a little confusion with this, I used Final Fantasy IX for a promo for that app Headliner. Like, I got contacted by Headliner and they asked if I wanted to advertise on their platform, and they offer like real downloads and real numbers. Well, they aren't fucking lying, because the way it works is that when you use the Headliner app, when you're waiting for your thing to get processed, like your little clip, they will play you other podcasts. So other podcasts can pay to advertise themselves on an app that people use for the clips of podcasts. It's a really good, honestly, I kind of like that they do that. I think it's a really cool way for podcasters to market it it is marketing it to other podcasters. But even so, like, as you know, dude, podcasters are some of the biggest listeners of podcasts outside of their own and outside of their friends, you know?
Oh, for sure. And I think it's funny you mentioned that, because like I use Headliner all the time too, and it is a really great way to discover new podcasts.
Exactly. So they used Final Fantasy IX, and when I say it overperformed, like the reason it's number 1, I'm talking almost 5 times number 2 in terms of download numbers. Like,
Wow.
it's huge. So I don't know how accurate Final Fantasy IX actually would be. If I were to guess based off popularity of the series, I would assume Final Fantasy IX would actually be in the number 3 spot. Final Fantasy VII would be in the number 2 spot, and Pokemon Gen 1 would be at the number 1 spot. So I'm kind of making Pokemon Gen 1 the de facto winner of like the top 10. Like, I would say they had the number 1 because Final Fantasy IX has inflated numbers from the advertising. But to shout out my guests for those episodes, I gotta shout them out. Final Fantasy VII was Chris Copeland from the Retro Hangover podcast and Keith Gasper from the Main Quest podcast. The Final Fantasy IX episode, if we're assuming that's number 3. Sorry, I kind of got this out of order. Final Fantasy IX had Final Fantasy IX had Dave Jackson from the Tales from the Backlog podcast and Game Dave from the Game Dave YouTube channel. So that would have been number 3. Number 2 would have been Final Fantasy VII, which I already said. Chris from Retro Hangover, Keith from Main Quest, and the number 1 podcast, Pokemon Gen 1, with Mono from Tokyo Game Life and my buddy that I mentioned from Final Fantasy VIII, Bill Barber from the Gaming and Collecting podcast. I mentioned before how like these series have been doing well. I would say so, considering out of the top 10, 3 of them are the top. In the top 5 alone is all 3 of the Final Fantasy Winter of Final Fantasies. Granted, they are popular games, so it's not surprising they got up so high, but even so. And then all the Mario games, all the Mario Month episode games, even the ones that like, New Super Mario Brothers Wii, like games that many people probably won't care about quite as much, made it up there. And the fact that like, I don't know, it's cool to me that it, out of the top 10, 7 of the top 10 were from series. And technically, even The Wizard was kind of part of its own mini series. I did it as kind of a back to back where The Wizard was episode 274. Episode 273 was a retrospective on the Famicom, the Japanese version of the NES for its 40th anniversary of its release in Japan. Like 40 years ago this summer, it came out in Japan. And so that episode was a tribute to one of the most important systems of all time. And that episode also had Stephen Reese and Game Dave and Try from My Life in Gaming. It had a lot of cool people on it. So yeah, that's my top 10. And real quick, just to list it off again, 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors with Kate Gray at number 10. New Super Mario Bros. Wii at 9, The Wizard at 8, Super Mario Galaxy 2 at 7, Super Mario Galaxy 1 at 6, New Super Mario Bros. From the Nintendo DS at 5, Final Fantasy 8 at 4, Final Fantasy 9 at 3 after I kind of revised that order, Final Fantasy 7 at 2, and Pokemon Gen 1 being the most popular episode of the year. So yeah, it's been a good year, dude. It's been a really good year. I'm happy with how these episodes turned out.
I played Pokemon Gen 1. Does that count?
It does count. You're all that's forgiven, TJ.
I really enjoyed that episode too, by the way, just for the record. I'm not shocked that one's your number one.
Well, TJ, we are going to move on to our final segment of the show. Oh, I guess technically second to last, because we're also going to talk about like what's a goal for us and for our podcasts, for our podcasting future in 2024. But we have a Q&A section, buddy. We got some Q's. We'll give them some A's, and we'll
hopefully give some A's, and hopefully the Q's will lead to more Q's.
Yeah, hopefully not. So yeah, let's go into it. I don't know which one to start off with. Let's start off with something a little bit lighter, because a lot of these were like really good, thoughtful questions. So we want to start off with something a little lighter. I'm going to start off with my buddy Dexter. His first question, I think it's only geared for me, is who is your favorite co-host with the Mo-host? And of course, it's my boo, Dexter, the guy who asked it. Dexter, you're my favorite co-host with the Mo-host. Of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? But his other question, something that's not just for our Captain N series, what is your favorite or most memorable video game rental? TJ, I want to start off with you. What's your favorite or most memorable video game rental?
So first off, to go back for a second, my favorite co-host with the Mo-host, probably at this point is you, because you're the only person I can consider a co-host for this show.
Because we show up once a year.
Not pre-Hodder Show, but at one point I did have several co-hosts on other podcasts. So I guess I could say Casual Jones from Two Guys at a Game was my favorite co-host with the Mo-host. But as far as my most memorable video game rental, that's a great question. For me, it was, I rented The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and played the shit out of it. And it ended up being like my favorite game ever. Taught me how to read and everything. That's
I remember, yeah.
I don't need to go into. It didn't actually teach me how to read. It helped improve my reading.
Well, it helped with your reading literacy. It helped with your literacy, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
And who says video games can't teach people?
Oh, yeah, I'll fight those people. I'm like, bruh, you don't even know what you're talking about. But
can you even read? Play Ocarina of Time?
Because I sometimes I forget how to read, and I got to go back and play Ocarina of Time. That's what Kaz said to me once. He was like, "Oh, you forgot how to read, so you have to go back and learn Ocarina of Time so you can learn how to read again." But yeah, probably that. I have such fond memories with that game when I rented it, and then it ended up leading to me getting it as a gift, which was a huge deal for me, obviously. There's hundreds of games I could talk about, but that one definitely sticks out for me. How about for you?
Well, for me, and real quick, I forgot to read the full part of his question. He asked the question, but then he also provided his own answer. And Dexter wrote, "A friend and I rented Onimusha 3 for a sleepover, and they stayed up all night and beat it in one session." Those were the best, man. When you would rent a game with a friend and just stay up super late. it was wonderful. But yeah, for mine, it was Pokemon Snap, also an N64 title. Um, I rented it because when I got my N64, I've told the story a bunch, but for those who have not heard it, when I got the N64, I didn't want it because it wasn't a Sega Genesis. I really wanted a Sega Genesis as a kid, and I was mad my parents didn't get me. I didn't know what an N64 was. So they got me Donkey Kong 64, and I was really kind of underwhelmed with the game, but I decided to, like, I eventually got hooked on it, I should say. But we went to Blockbuster like either the day after Christmas or like the second day after Christmas or something like that, and we rented Pokemon Snap, and I really enjoyed it because it was the only Pokemon game that I could find for it at the time. Because even though I didn't have a Game Boy, I was obsessed with Pokemon at the time, so had to play Pokemon Snap. And before we move on to the next question, Tej, do you like when people call you TJ,
I
or do
don't
you
really
hate
have a
that?
preference. I don't think I've ever heard you refer to me as Tej, but
I've
some people
never
do,
referred to you
so
as Tej.
it's fine. It doesn't really, yeah, it doesn't
I
really
don't know
matter.
why that came out of me, but there we go.
Whatever, I'll take it.
um, I got to talk real quick about Dexter and our Captain N series.
Please
For
do.
those who are new to the show or who have not listened to it, 2.5 years ago, Dexter and I started a rewatch series of Captain N, the Game Master, which was a cartoon from the 90s, or late 80s, early 90s. And it was about this kid named Kevin who got sucked into a place called Videoland. And it's all a place where all the video game people, the characters that he played on his NES existed, and he could interact with them. And the show's fucking nuts. It is the best combination of bad but good, and just it is crazy. And I loved doing it for 2.5 years. Once a month, him and I would cover one episode of the show, and we would, even though the episodes are like 20 minutes long, we would probably spend about 40 minutes to over an hour dissecting a 20-minute episode. And it was a great time, and I can't thank him enough for it. And we just finished that series this month in December of 2023. We wrapped up the Captain N series, and I feel so bad that I didn't reference it as one of the highlights of my year, because I guess because Captain N was going on for so long, it didn't feel like something that was, this is an event that just happened this year, because Captain N had been going on for 2.5 years, but we wrapped it up. One of my favorite experiences in podcasting, and I can't thank Dexter enough for spending so much time with me, man. Like 2.5 years is a long fucking time for a monthly show, or for any show. It's nuts.
And what was so cool from the standpoint of just, your boy over here, I got to see you co-hosting with somebody. Even though it wasn't like a regular thing, it was still regular enough that it was like, it was so cool to see, because I was like, I know from interacting with you that, like, you would be a fantastic host with the right person. And you and Dexter have such an awesome chemistry that it makes it so enjoyable to listen to you guys talk about these just horrendous episodes of this cartoon. Like, it makes it so enjoyable. And as much as I'm sad it's ended, I'm like, hey, it's really cool that you did it, you know?
When we tried to get you on a few times,
Yeah, yeah,
it just
yeah.
scheduling couldn't work out. But never fear, TJ and listeners, Tej and listeners.
Teach and
Um,
listeners.
we're going to be doing another series at some point on a different cartoon. I don't know the cartoon yet, but we are actively contemplating and thinking. And that actually leads me to another question I received, and it's from my buddy Mass Keaton over on Discord. And he writes, "Journeys change people. How do you think the Captain N journey has changed you?" And so, TJ, I know you can't really answer this one, unless, I mean, if you maybe listening somehow changed you. I highly doubt it, but you never know.
I mean, it made me realize that I should never watch the Captain N series.
What are you talking
Does
about?
that
It's a,
change?
it's a,
Does that
it's
change a person?
it's a beautiful tribute to the journey of a human. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Changed
Um,
me.
I would say, Keaton, the thing that has changed me the most about that Captain N journey is covering media that's not games. It gave me 2.5 years of practice on kind of honing my podcasting craft on how to talk about media that isn't games, how to break down something bit by bit. And I know other people will talk about, like, other podcasts will, when they cover like a movie or a TV show, they just talk about specific moments or this and that. I've always been a fan of breaking it down, beat by beat, like story beat by story beat. I always found that the most interesting because it gives people the most chances to talk about like all the minor things that maybe they would have forgotten if you were just kind of riffing back and forth. And that's why I do what I do with Still Bonding, and that's why those episodes are so long, because Bond movies are over 2 hours long. And like the most recent one, License to Kill, was 4 hours and 20 minutes, or like 4 hours, and I think it was like 2 minutes shy of like double the length of the movie, because I think the movie was like 2 hours and 10, and we were 2 hours and eight, or sorry, when we were 4 hours and 18 minutes, like we were just 2 minutes shy of double the movie length. And so there is some drawbacks to it, but I think overall with the Captain N series, and what I took away from it was just how to cover media that's not games. And music is something that maybe will be a challenge for next year. That's not one of my goals, but I think I could do a lot better on talking about music, whether it's game or other video games or otherwise, and talking about it intelligently. That's something I would like to practice with. Who knows? Maybe I'll start doing that for on the Patreon first for some of the bonus episodes, which I already kind of have some. I have like Genesis Jams episodes and SNES selections, which is just a little selection of music from the various consoles and whatnot. So yeah, that's I think that's what for me changed me the most with the Captain N journey, was just the ability or the practice it gave me at talking about other forms of media.
Can I throw
Now,
something out there real quick before you
go
continue?
for it.
So you just said something that kind of triggered my brain for a second there. Just throwing it out there. If you ever want to talk a video game music-esque type episode with your boy, we should talk Majora's Mask music. Just throwing it out there.
All right, all right. We
Just
could.
just throwing it out there. You
That'd
know.
be interesting. Like a whole episode focused on just the music from
Yep.
Majora's Mask.
I mean Majora's Mask in general, but just talking about, I could probably riff for quite a bit just about the music and the effect it had on me and everything. So just throw it, even if it's Patreon, whatever, just throwing it out there.
All
Throwing it
right,
out
all
there.
right.
Yeah,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
trying to find ways to
Uh,
get on your podcast. It's fine.
well, I'll have to get. I mean, I still have, like I said, I have to get you back on for Aiden Chronicles: The First Mage. Only
It's
the
never
most
going to happen, and
iconic.
we're going to keep talking about it every time we do one of these, and then one day it's
I
going to
know
happen.
it's going to be just like a running joke. Like, when are you going to do Aiden Chronicles?
It's going to be
Like, I don't know, fucking
the
some
most
point
highly anticipated episode in our
of a
great
game that
media.
no one cares about
Yep.
except you.
Hey, there is a very loyal Facebook group about it. So
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
oddly enough, there actually is a little bit of a following for it. But anyway, it's jokes, all jokes, folks.
Now, in keeping with Keaton's question, he asked a second question as well. What's the most evil act you have committed in a video game? Was it forced on you by the game, or did you do it of your own free will? TJ, do you have an answer? I don't think I asked you, because with some of these, I actually gave you the cute questions beforehand, so you'd have time to prepare some answers. Do you have one for this? If not, I know mine and can answer it right now.
You go first.
Okay.
Let me think about it.
So for me, it was from Spec Ops: The Line. Now, there's a little bit of spoilers with this, minor. I'm not going to spoil the main story of it, but there's a section in the game where a game kind of forces you to drop phosphorus bombs on a whole bunch of enemies. And when you go down to inspect the carnage that you wrought, and phosphorus bombs are like, they're fucking brutal, man. Like, they burn through people, and it's just rapidly hot. And like, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know exactly all the ins and outs of what it does, but it's borderline inhumane. And so when you go down and you're seeing like charred remains and people, some of the people who might still barely be alive are missing parts of their body. It's really nasty. And you get to the end of this, so it's building up, like this whole section is building up, and you're just like witnessing the carnage you created. And you round a corner, and there is a mother holding her child, and they're they're dead, but they are like essentially just ashes in place. Like they are charred alive, like frozen in time. And dude, I almost cried when I got to that part. Like I when I play games, I can't do evil acts when it's just like me choosing to, like in like, Fable or like Skyrim. Like I always play the goody two shoes or something like that. But so I didn't have an answer for anything that like I chose, but when it was forced on me, Spec Ops: The Line is the thing that like really hit hard for me. I could also probably think of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 with the whole airport thing, but this one was a little bit more impactful for me because A, it's a little bit more recent, and B, also now that I'm a parent, that seeing that mother and child just fucking destroyed me. It was a brutal moment.
Yeah, I totally, absolutely get it. That actually probably would have been one of my answers if I'm being honest with you. For me, let me think about that for a second. Probably throwing the penguin off the glacier in Mario, Super Mario 64, because that's just pure evil. There's no, you're not forced to do it. You just
I
do
like
it.
how what a nosebleed of a hairpin turn. That was, oh my God, they're talking about mother and child getting burned alive in a in like war crimes. I dropped a fictional penguin off of off a fictional world.
I didn't look at it like that. Oh gosh, yeah, probably that. But also like,
I mean, that penguin's also fucking annoying.
yeah, I threw that motherfucker off every chance I got. So fuck that penguin. I don't give a shit. He ain't real. I don't care.
I mean,
No, but
technically,
like,
what happened in my game was also not
yeah,
real, but it's portrayed as
but I
real. But
get it.
still,
Yeah.
that that nosebleed of a swig, holy shit! Oh my God! All right, let's move on.
Oh god.
um, this is from the Retro Wildlands podcast. Looking back on 2023, what's a lesson or thing that you learned that you are excited to take into 2024 with you? CJ, do you? Let's start off with you since I answered first last time. What's something that you learned in 2023 that you're excited to take with you into 2024?
So for me, it's a pretty, I'll say this as quick as I can. On a personal note, also in regards to the podcast, is not letting things bother me so much, like, I often struggle with like, I'll be like, oh, I don't have content this week. Oh man. And then I'll like spiral out of control because I don't have a podcast up that week. And it's like at the end of the day, that's not fun, right?
No.
That makes it not enjoyable. So I've really gotten better with not letting that bother me, but
Mhm.
also not to take it so seriously. Like first and foremost, it's supposed to be fun. And yes, I
Yeah.
think you should treat it in some situations like a business and whatnot, but also at the same time, you gotta have fun. And I mentioned earlier, I feel like I kind of found my I found the fun again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stress so much about if I have a week where I don't have content or whatever, or like, oh, I record some content quickly just so I have an episode, and then I look back on the episode and I'm like, that wasn't my best work.
Hmm.
It's little things like that. But then also in my personal life, just not letting things bug me so much, man. Like I have a really short temper. I wouldn't say it's a bad temper because I get over things pretty quick, but like
Hmm.
I'll have a little like, and I'm like, oh, that was really silly. Why did I just get mad about that? Like, it's embarrassing, and it's just like I feel like I understand more where these things come from and why I do those things, and then it's like let's try and leave that a bit in 2023, and let's not take things so seriously in life, and just try to make sure I'm living and having fun and everything, So that's kind of what I'm trying to bring into 2024 with me that I learned in 2023.
it's a good thing to have learned. I feel like I remember I was talking to you off mic about how it really got under your skin when you didn't have content out every single week. And I can tell you, as someone who I've been able to stay consistent this whole year, which is awesome, but there is really a sense of like you don't get to really enjoy the episodes you're putting out every week because you're always just focused on the next one. So like I just had my Captain N finale come out. The time we're recording this the week the Captain N episode, the finale came out. And I'm already focused on the next episode. Like it's already uploaded and ready to go, which is awesome. But it feels like I'm it feels like you can't really enjoy the work that you've put into it. And I look back and I can look back on all the episodes I made this year. I'm very proud of pretty much all of them. And but at the same time, like in the moment, I can't really enjoy the work that I've put in for those episodes. I did a super personal episode this year called Rocking Chairs, Halo 2, and LAN Party Memories, where I interviewed a bunch of people from I had my mom on the show for the first time. I interviewed other people that I've never had on the show. My friend CJ, who I've never had, and my friend Jamie, who I have had on a handful of times, and all about like memories. And that one was really fun and important to me. And I did advertise it a little bit, but as soon as that was done, I'm like, all right, Captain N is next week. That's episodes 5 and 6 of season 3. That's the next one up. Oh, what's after that? Oh, it was Spire the Dragon. So it like you really don't get you don't I feel like, at least for me, I don't enjoy the content as much. I'm not allowing myself to enjoy the fruits of my labor, So I think it was kind of smart. If it's causing you that much stress, I think it was a good thing that you took some time off and just kind of said, fuck it. Like, I'm not going to have an episode this week if it's not going to be a good one. And I think that's a really smart and mentally healthy thing to do.
For sure. And it's not like, oh, I don't want to have content because fucking, I don't want to do it. It's just like, if I can't, for whatever reason, I'm not going to force myself to do something and look back on it and not be proud of it. That's basically the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. For myself, for this question, looking back on 2023, what I really am going to be taking into 2024 is time management. This year, I have done more content than I ever have an entire year for the podcast. I do 2 bonus episodes every month. I do a full, the James Bond, the still bonding stuff every month. And those episodes aren't short. 2.5 hours is the shortest episode in that series. And so far, 4 hours and 18 minutes is the longest. Like it takes a long time to record that. It takes a long time to edit that. And I'm also doing, like I said, I'm doing the bonus episodes, and then I'm also doing the main episodes every single week. And so I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't learn time management skills. Part of that is also shout out to my wife. Her and I are the definition of like, we like to do our own thing, but separately. Like we love to be together, but you do your thing. I'll go into this other room and do my thing. We like knowing that each other are in the house, but we'll go off and do our own thing. If I didn't have that, I don't think I'd be able to do everything that I'm doing while working a full-time job, while being a parent and all that other stuff. And so time management, learning to balance it between work and family and the podcast, and I've gotten a lot better at it over the year, and so much so that I'm planning something I can't announce because it's contingent on a personal life thing. And once that personal life thing happens, then I can announce it. And actually, if you're curious, I did announce it on the Patreon. If you want to become a patron, on the bonus episode that's actually coming out very soon, I talk about it a little bit, but the project is big, and so I'm actually in the process of working on it right now. Like I've already recorded a handful of episodes for this project that I want to do. Recorded one, planned others. In any case, but yeah, so time management, that's the biggest thing that I've taken in for this year.
And I think that's important because, especially in
Yeah.
the podcast world,
Yeah.
obviously.
Holy shit. Dude, there's a friend of mine, which I won't name because I don't know. It's nothing like it bad, but just in case they don't want any of their personal things that we've talked about in private to get aired. A friend of mine who also does a podcast has talked to me a lot about how they don't know how they're able to do stuff weekly, and I'm like, like if you want to stay consistent, this is the biggest advice I offer to any podcaster. If you want to be like, the biggest key to me is consistency. Like, you're going to learn how to be better at podcasting through practice. You could be the shittiest speaker in the world, but you're going to get better, or at least serviceable, maybe even great, if you keep practicing at this. But consistency is one of the hardest things to achieve, because it's not a work ethic issue. You could be one of the hardest working, dude. You're one of the hardest working people that I've ever known. Like every time I'm texting you, you're like, yeah, I'm off at this job and I got another job later and blah blah, and you still somehow find time to do like audio drama stuff on top of your, like, for your patrons, while on top of doing the Hodder Show and shit like that. It's not a work ethic issue. It's just time management and what are you able to commit to it, because everyone's life is different. Everyone's you know free time and personal time is going to vary. Like, your life situation is different than mine, so you can't necessarily have the same recording schedule that I do. Like today, we're recording in the afternoon, which worked out nicely because I could use some time off from work to do this. But like, that's not always the case. So like, what are you going to do? How do you do a podcast when you can't be guaranteed to get guests at the right time? The whole thing. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I always tell people that time management and consistency are the most important things for a prospective podcaster. I tell people, start off making an episode, see how long it takes you to make the episode. That gives you an idea of how long your turnaround time is at the start, until you learn the craft, and then you can get quicker at it. Then start trying to record a bunch of episodes before you release any, just so that way, you have a backlog, B, you have an idea of how hard it is, or how efficient or easy it is to be able to schedule recording sessions, get them put together, and then edit and release. There's a whole bunch to it, but like, that's always my advice that I offer people.
Which is fantastic advice, for the record. That's something that we'll talk about in a little bit, what we're, our goal for the new year. But that's something for me this
Yes.
year that has been so hard with my schedule, is scheduling interviews. And like, it's, I won't lie, it's starting to weigh on me a bit, because I'm like, man, the amount of interviews I've had to cancel this year. I don't like canceling stuff. Like, I hate it. I hate
Yeah.
it. I hate it. I hate it. It makes my skin crawl. And I'm just like, yeah. So I don't like canceling things. And then when I have to, because things change, it's like, ugh. And then also from the guest standpoint, they don't want to deal with that either, So
No.
that's something I got
And
to figure out
actually,
in the new year for sure.
you know what? I think that's a good transition into the next question: is what was the most challenging episode to record in 2023 for you? This is from my buddy Lucas Egan over the Land Parties podcast. So shout out to Lucas. And I'm pretty sure I said it, but just in case, the last question was from the Retro Wildlands podcast. And we're talking about what we're taking into 2024. But yeah, from Lucas Egan from the Land Parties podcast, what was the most challenging episode to record in 2023? For myself, I know I just went last time, but since we're just going to swapping off who does first and last and all that other stuff. It was the Final Fantasy draft that came out over the summer, and that was strictly because of logistics, because of time management and scheduling, because those episodes, I'm only the MC, I'm only the commissioner, as I call myself on that. There are 4 other guests on it. So there's 5 different people, including myself, that we have to manage our schedules for. That can be very tough to do. That there's a lot of time that goes into it, and it can be tough to manage. So by far, that was the most challenging episode for me to record, just based purely on logistics. But what about you, TJ? What's your most challenging episode from this past year?
I don't really know if there's one specifically I can pinpoint. Probably just pretty much any interview I did, just because of the scheduling. But well, actually, I'll give a better answer. That Halloween episode, probably because I was doing a lot of second guessing at that moment in time. I was like, man, I suck. Oh man, this sounds terrible. Blah 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 blah. And all the sound design I did for it and everything, I spent hours on it, and it was challenging to get through because
Mhm.
I wanted it to be so perfect, right? I wanted it to be a very certain way that I heard in my head, and it took a lot to do that to get to that point. So it was definitely challenging recording it and editing it and doing the production and everything. But the end result was something I was very happy with. So that still counts, I think.
Agreed. Let's move on to a little less serious one. We've talked about a few serious. We've done a few serious questions. This one is from Parallax Puddles. He actually asked a few others, but I don't know. Um, actually, one is, are birds real? The whole, you know,
They
uh,
absolutely are. Wink.
wink. And they're not CIA drones. Nope.
Wink.
No. I love that fake conspiracy theory. It's amusing. Another one he asked, which is a pretty decent one. I forgot to include this on our little like prep sheet, but an alien has landed their craft on your front lawn, and they asked you to show them the one game that best represents humanity. What would it be?
Goat Simulator
Uh, go to and it's
or
all.
Manhunt, either or.
Oh my god. Um, Oh my goodness. Serious answer, maybe Last of Us, just because it shows both the light and the dark, but more dark. But it's a sad
Then they'll
because
leave
it's a sad
immediately. They'll be
series.
like, yo, these guys got like fungus zombies here. We're getting the fuck out of here.
Seriously.
Dance Dance Revolution
Maybe
might be a good one as well.
DDR.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. But yeah, I have no idea. Like what best
I'd show
represents
Majora's
humanity.
Mask.
Sure.
Seriously.
You know
Yeah.
what? Let's do it. Let's go with Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Dark
Um,
story, the fluidity of the game, everything. Everything all about it. I love it. I love
and
Majora's
it
Mask a
shows a lot
lot.
of different human elements
Yes.
between love with like Anju and what's her face, and or maybe Anju is the girl. I don't remember, but yeah. Um, the question of his that I wrote down on our outline, I forgot the birds one and this and the alien one, but the one that we did have time to prep for. What was your favorite piece of media in 2023? And TJ, since I answered first last time, we're throwing it over to you. What was your favorite piece of media in 2023?
I thought a lot about this, and I could pick many different things. Obviously, in my podcast, there's tons I could pick from.
Lots of music.
But I'm going, yeah, or music. I could sit here and have a whole thing just about that. It was some awesome music this year. Shout out to Stain's record, Confessions of the Fallen. But I think in general, the piece of media I enjoyed the most and that had the most impact on me was the Netflix series Fall of the House of Usher.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful
Based off
horror
the Edgar
series.
Allan Poe story, right?
Yes. And it is fantastic.
Oh man, I'm not a big horror fan, but I've heard that show is great. For me, mine was actually also a TV show, but not a horror show. Amazon TV's Reacher, the based off the book series by I think Lee Child is the author, but it's like Jack Reacher's a character. Tom Cruise played him in that one movie, actually in two different movies.
Right.
But the TV show Reacher stars a dude named Alan Richson. I believe a second season might have just come out either today, the day we're recording this, or maybe tomorrow. There's a second season that's just dropping, and I'm so excited. It's a really great TV show. It's kind of it is a little bit of just like a man, like a cis white dude's like wet dream. It's like this super buff dude. Like I mean, it is. It's a super buff, tall white dude who is the smartest dude in the room of any room he's into. He always has some type of like super badass comeback to everything. Everything he says sounds cool. And he can like he's got a strong sense of moral justice, and I don't know. I know I made kind of a joke about that, but I fucking love the show, dude. It's so good. And from the people who read the books, my dad included, and my friend Al at work, um, apparently it's like very close to the book. Both in the way that Reacher appears, like the actual casting choice for Reacher looks very similar to how he's written in the book. So yeah, I love the show, man. I absolutely love the show. Like unapologetically love the show. I can't wait for season 2 because season 1, like you can find clips of it all the time online on like TikTok reels and shit like that,
I've seen a bit
where
of
they
it.
always have like yeah, and it's always like, him in like some prison and saying something fucking badass. I love it. I love that show. But I'm not denying that it's like it checks the box for every stereotypical like male interest out there, like
Sure, but
it
that's not a bad thing, is it? I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't know. To me, well, because there's always so much of that shit out there, this is just like really well done of that. I love it. I love this show. But yeah. All right. Uh, moving on, I have three more questions that we can answer here. We're going to go over to a question from Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog. What was the most proud moment of the podcast for you this year? Or what about the podcast this year are you most proud of? And for myself, I'll start off this one. It was two different things specifically, and I'll touch on one very shortly. Actually, both of them, because one I kind of answered earlier. One was guesting on a ton of episodes. I know guesting isn't like, it's kind of part of my show, but kind of not. But I loved being able to guest on so many different podcasts this year. I was so happy so many people invited me. In fact, I was invited on another one, but we were supposed to record this weekend, but I have too much stuff going on, so we're having to postpone. So I'll be on another show sometime next year, which I'm really excited about. There's so many shows that invited me on, between Unlocking What Was Cool, between Jala Chan's Place, between Tales from the Backlog, Secret Levels podcast. Um, I did some stuff over at Retro Hangover, Pixel Project Radio, Remember 64, Nostalgia Arcanum. That's a few of them. I'm so sorry. Or Main Quest. I'm just like looking through my list right now of other shows I'm subscribed to. I'm like, did I guest on this one? I'm not sure. Gaming and Collecting. Like, so many different shows. I'm sorry if I don't list all of them, but like I said, there's 30 some odd appearances. Some of them, multiple times. But yeah, guesting on shows was something I was really proud of this year, because it's something I've always wanted to do more of, and it's just fun to do. But in terms of my own show, like something I worked on directly for my podcast, it was the Winter of Final Fantasy earlier this year. Like way earlier, so like January into February. I love that series so much. I'm so proud of it. It was a big undertaking for me because I replayed all of those Final Fantasies in preparation. And Final Fantasy games are RPGs, of course. So they're not short. They're 30 to 50 hours each. And I played all of them over the span of a few months. I think I started playing Final Fantasy 9 in like, I did that one first. And I think I started playing in like September, and I played through all of that, recorded the episode, moved on to Final Fantasy VIII, played through all of that. 7 was the one I was able to beat the quickest because I've played it so much. I beat that game in like, I don't know, maybe a week, because I know where everything is. I know how to beat the game pretty quickly. But that still is like, that's a lot of time to devote to a game. Like, it's minimum 90 hours for those 3 games, and it was definitely longer than 90 hours. Like, I spent over 100 hours just prepping for those episodes by replaying all of them. That's not including all the time that I spend looking up research and other things. So I'm so proud of that series. I'm so happy with how it turned out. And yeah, that was my proudest moment, or the thing I'm most proud of this year for the podcast. TJ, what about you? What were you most proud of for your podcast this year?
For me, I kind of already touched on it, but as far as what I'm most proudest about, it's just kind of continuing the show after such a long hiatus. Uh, just kind of trying new things with I did a watch along for the first time ever, which was a lot of fun, and that was
Mhm.
also terrifying because I'd never done anything like that before. The first exclusive listen stuff was fun. I'm just proud of myself for, still rolling and trying new things this late into the game, I guess is the best way to put it. And yeah, that's
You should be.
mine's not as poetic, but that's that's about it.
No, but even so, like we've talked about this. I think every year we do our retrospectives, where your schedule is like fucked as hell. Like, it is all over the place, and the fact that you still, for as many years as you did, release weekly content, despite how crazy your schedule is just impressive. So like I've always been impressed by that. So I think you have every right to be proud of the fact that you are still doing the show despite everything that you have to deal with in your, like, not deal with makes it sound like your personal life is like shitty, but like your work schedule, like I said, is nuts. So the fact that you still kept it going despite all the chaos that is your work schedule is just impressive.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that I've been still doing regardless, for what will be 9 years. And
Dude, I'm coming up on my 10th soon. I
yeah,
feel you.
which is wild, dude. I can't
Yeah.
believe you've been doing it for 10 years. That's wild, man. That's
We're
awesome.
too old
Too
podcasting
old for this
heads.
shit, dude.
Nah, yeah, old and wrinkles and young and sprinkles. I don't know. I don't know
Old
what
and wrinkles and young and sprinkles.
old
I
in
like it.
wrinkles and young and sprinkles. I don't know
Okay.
what any of that means. I was trying to find a rhyme, and it was the first thing that
Oh
came to
my
mind.
goodness. Okay. Well, that's a phrase. All right. Moving on.
The worst part is it's not even like this is in the evening. This is in the middle of the afternoon. I'm already like loopy.
Oh gosh.
All right. Two questions left, TJ. This second to last one is from the Bits of Time podcast. Is there a game in your backlog that you didn't get to this year that you for sure want to tackle in 2024? Now, I know you don't do gaming coverage, but let's just say, what's a game in your backlog you want to play? We'll just do that for you.
What was that one you were saying earlier? The visual novel. What was it?
Oh, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors.
Yeah, that's the one.
There we
There
go.
it is,
There
right
we
there.
are.
No, but I think for me, oh man, I'm trying to think if there is any. I downloaded the Alan Wake series. It was one of the free
Yeah.
games on PS, and I haven't got to it yet, but I know I'm going to enjoy it. I just have to get to it. So probably the Alan Wake series actually, because I never played it. So I'm excited to jump into that when I'm able to.
I have the first one. I've been meaning to play it as well, but I'm holding off because I feel like I'm riding the bandwagon if I go to play the first one right when the second one is like
Right.
so hyped, you know. But by the time I actually play it and then do a podcast on it, it's going to be out of the news cycle. But for my own answer, real quick, it's God of War 2 specifically for the PS2. The reason is and this kind of ties into a goal of mine, which I'll elaborate a little bit more on. I've been meaning to do the God of War series, and I'll explain more about the goal later on. I've been meaning to cover the God of War series for a little bit of time now. I've already done an episode on the first God of War, and I kind of want to redo that one a little bit just because I've gained a lot of experience since 2020, and it'll be like 4 years since that episode came out almost. And God of War 2 is where I kind of left off in the series. I played God of War 1, I played God of War Chains of Olympus on the PSP, and I played the God of War on the PS4, the God of War with Norse mythology, the first one of that on the PS4. Loved all of them, but I never beat God of War 2. So I kind of want to go back and replay God of War 1, play and beat God of War 2, and just kind of work my way through the series. So that's a game in the backlog for me that I was thinking about trying to do this year, never got around to, and I do want to tackle in 2024, which gives you a bit of a hint as a goal of mine for the podcast for 2024. But we move on to our final question, TJ. Our final question: the funniest thing that happened during a recording session this year. And this comes from my good friend Jala from Jala Chan's Place. She is an amazing podcaster. Go check her out. She was on some of the Captain N episodes with Dexter and I. I do want to have her on in the future for some other games, but that is the question she asked. What was the funniest thing that happened during recording? I'll start off and I'll let you have the last laugh, as it were, for this one. Um, with my own show. It was from the Final Fantasy Draft. Now, if you are interested in this episode, listeners, and you have not listened to the Final Fantasy Draft, one, it is, if you don't know what it is, it's fantasy sports meets Final Fantasy mashed up together. You don't need to know fantasy sports to like it, though. It's just all things Final Fantasy, and it's wonderful. So if you don't want to know a spoiler as to parts of the discussion for the one that came out this year, skip ahead just like a couple, 30 seconds or so. I don't know how much exactly, 30 seconds or so. The thing that I laughed hardest at during the recording this year was when we were doing the draft. everyone at the end of the draft, you're supposed to pitch your Final Fantasy. And Sebastian Decken, who was on the episode, he's an author who wrote a book on Final Fantasy VI. And his Final Fantasy, instead of going with the typical, four badasses fighting some crazy villain trying to destroy the world, he ended up with he picked one adult and three other children, and it turned into basically a Full House crossover of Final Fantasy or some other 90s sitcom. And it was all about the drama between these kids' dad falling in love with someone else and them having to adjust, learning to have a second dad type of thing. It was one of the most wild things that it just came so far out of left field, and it was so well done, and Sebastian just fucking knocked it out of the park. It was just, I was laughing he didn't even mention any of the romance stuff going on. It was just the fact that we called it out on the episode where I'm like, so let me get this straight. You have a grown ass man and four children tagging along, and they drive in a family car together, and it just turned into this insane, this insane, family 90s sitcom, but with Final Fantasy characters. It was great.
That's awesome. I love to hear stuff like that.
Dude, I can't stop laughing at it. But all right, TJ, we are wrapping this up with our final question here. What was the funniest thing that happened during a recording session for you this year?
So for me, I'm gonna go with two. Number one, when I was recording the Ask Sam Anything episode with my wife, my dog Luna would not stop wooing. She goes, oh, woo, 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 when she's happy and stuff. And for the entire recording session, that was all she was doing. So it was it was just kind of, I had to laugh about it because it was either I get frustrated or I laugh. So I'm like, you know what? She's happy to see us. She's happy. Fine. It's all good. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Yeah. She just looked at me. She's like, what are you talking about, bruh? And then the other thing was on my most recent, and you can actually see this if you go to the Hodder Show YouTube, my interview with Adam Baldwin from Flesh Guzzler.
Sorry, that name is just.
It's and also he's a vegan, by the way, so it's actually kind of hilarious that
that's really funny.
His solo band is Flesh Guzzler. As I was doing my intro spiel, the first 30 seconds of my spiel to introduce him and stuff and talk about him, Morty jumped up in my arms and was all over me. So it fucked me up really bad, but I left it in anyway. And then that's one reason why I uploaded the video of that interview. So if you go on the Hodder Show YouTube channel, you can actually physically see that. So it's kind of hilarious. But those are probably two of the funniest things that happened while I was recording podcasts this year. Some funny moments and stuff happened, but nothing that was super noteworthy that you wouldn't necessarily hear on air.
Yeah, I getcha. Well, yeah, that's all the questions that we had.
Nice. That was fun, though.
From listeners. That was fun. A lot of good questions, too. So thank you to everyone who wrote in. We're going to wrap up this episode with we're kind of running along on time. So instead of listing a whole bunch of goals, let's just list one goal each. Unless you had planned more than one, TJ. But let's just list one goal each. So TJ, what's a goal for you in 2024? What do you want to see with your podcast in the next year?
So for me, quite simply, I wanted to get to episode 400, which I'm, well on the way of. And I want to do a live episode for that on my Discord with guests interacting live. So instead of a Q&A type thing, I want them to be able to actually physically talk to me during that live episode. And then that'd be really fun.
Yeah.
It's something I've never done before. And I want to do it for episode 400, and I want to say it here now so that I have to do it. And that makes it a thing. And then the only other thing I need to mention, because we did talk about it earlier, and I haven't really officially said this yet until now, but 2024, early 2024, hopefully January, I will be making my Patreon podcast, Taste of Trepidation, the horror narration podcast, into a public show. Which is something that I haven't really talked about yet, but I think everyone pretty much sees it coming. You'd have to be pretty I think everyone can pretty much see that coming. The route I've been going the last
Mhm.
few years. But so
Mhm.
that's so my goals, two very simple goals. Get to episode 400 and keep going, keep doing my thing with the Hodder Show. Try that guest Discord thing. Try to, get better, obviously, with the Hodder Show, but then also launch Tape for Trepidation and just go all out with it and really try and make something cool and unique. That's my goal. And just have fun. Keep having fun.
Of which I actually did one episode
You
of, I
did. And
believe.
people
I
will
did the
hear that,
narration.
by the way.
All
So
right.
that's going to be fun.
I'll count that as a guest spot for next year.
Yes. So you're going to be at one at least whenever that happens.
There we go. Without doing a goddamn thing, I'm already at one. That's great. For my own show, y'all, I want to do. So I had an idea. I normally don't shout out my ideas that don't come to fruition, but maybe I'll do something like it anyway. This year I did Winter of Final Fantasy. Well, I'm like, well, how can I do another series like that? And I thought it'd be fun to do Winter of War, which I would cover the God of War series, these or three of the games from the God of War series, just to kind of keep with the whole three thing. Since I did three Final Fantasies, I'll do three God of Wars. So Winter of War, it is something I want to do. But maybe I'll change it, but like Winter of War is just so alliterative, so I kind of want to, if I do those God of War things I mentioned before, I want to wait until winter. So we'll see if I can get it in like February. We'll see. I might have time depending on how long it takes me to play through the games and do research and all that other good stuff. But yeah, so that's one of them. And still, as I have said in previous retrospectives, I still want to do that scripted episode. I have an idea, I have a story in mind. I have not taken the time, and I have time to do it. I do. I just keep putting it off, and I don't know why. I just need to sit down and record basically like an audio drama. Like there are some short stories that are video game based that I could use that I think would work. I have one definitively in mind. Like I said, though, I would want to record it and then ask permission, and then if they're cool with it, I'll release it. If they're not, I just won't, and it'll just be practice for me, and that's fine. But that's really my goal. I want to do a Winter of War. I want to cover the God of War games. I also have some ideas for like I want to cover some more obscure games that actually have a series, like the Marathon games, which were essentially like Mac's version of like Mac computers version of Doom. And it was one of Bungie's earliest games before they created Halo. So I really want to do those. So I don't know. I'll think about that. But those are some of my goals, just kind of specific game franchises that I really want to dive into. And also maybe just that scripted thing. It'd be fun. So yeah, that's it. That's what those are my goals.
As far as the scripted audio drama thing, that I'll be happy to help with that any way I can, because that's kind of going to be my wheelhouse.
I
So
will I will probably be asking for some help specifically with
yes,
like the ambiance.
yes, sound design and all that.
So
Well, and also I
sound
know some
design
people who would happily probably give some you know
pointers,
advice in that world too. So
royalty free sounds.
yes, we'll get something rolling. It'll be cool. And as far as obscure games, I mean, Aiden Chronicles: The First Mage is pretty obscure. So just
You
throwing
know
it out
what?
there.
You're right. It is pretty fucking obscure. And I did try playing it, dude, and I could not. I need to give it a more serious try,
You
but
got
it
to
was
get like
rough.
3 or 4 hours in, then it starts getting acceptable.
Maybe you know what? Like we'll get on like a Skype call or something
Yes,
one day when you have like an afternoon free, and we'll just chat while we're both playing the game. We'll figure it out from there.
I think that'd be a lot of fun. Just like this was a lot of
Right?
fun, man. I always love doing this with you. I have such a blast, and I'm so grateful to you and all the folks at Still Loading Podcast here for all the support and checking this out, and also obviously my listeners at the Hodder Show. Obviously, can't goes without saying. So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you doing this with me, man. It's always a blast getting to do these retrospectives with you.
It's always a pleasure to have you on, man. And let's wrap up this episode, right? This was a really fun end of the year wrap up. It's always funny to me. I'm like, we were at like an hour, and I'm like, man, we're going a lot shorter than I expected, and now we're over 2 hours. I'm like, oh my god, we talk way too fucking much. But we're two podcasters, so what do you expect?
What do you expect?
But I know, right? But dude, seriously, thank you so much for joining me on this. TJ, where can the good people find you online? And is there anything you would like to shout out and promote?
As far as for me, The Hodder Show is my podcast. You can find it wherever you find your podcasts. I also have Facebook and Instagram. On my Instagram, you will also find a link to my link tree, which has lots of other links. Stay tuned for Tapes of Trepidation Horror Narration podcast that is coming sometime early 2024. I don't want to give an exact date yet, just in case, but it's coming. So yeah, it's coming. Otherwise, I have a Discord. If you want to join that, hit me up. Let me know. I will send you.
I mean,
a link.
if you want to provide a link to it, I can put it in the show notes.
I'll give you my link tree because I think that has everything. That should have everything on it.
Oh yeah, I'll put the link tree in the show notes.
Yes.
I always forget I have a Discord as well, and I never freaking advertise it. I do have a Discord.
Josh, where can the good people find you on social media?
At Still Loading Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I still refuse to call it the other place. So it is always going to be Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Twitch, at Still Loading Pod, at Still Loading Podcast on YouTube. If you want to support the show, please consider doing so. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, Spotify, etc. It helps more people find the show, and I like seeing the reviews. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy, and who doesn't like feeling warm and fuzzy, especially in the winter? Come on. But you can go over there. You can support it that way. You can also support it monetarily. Patreon.com/stillloadingpod. I've talked about it a lot over the episodes, so I won't go over absolutely everything over and over and over again, but there is bonus content at the $4 levels, there's early access at the $1 levels, and there is a lot of bonus content at the $5 level. There's bonus episodes, too many bonus episodes a month at the $4 level, and the full still bonding that I was talking about before, that's at the $5 level. But at the $5 level, you get everything from the previous. So you get everything from the 4, everything from the 1, all that good stuff. So yeah, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. It would mean a lot to me if you like what I do and you want to help support it and grow it. It would really mean a lot if you consider it. And of course, my last shout out, the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. That's it. That is the last episode of 2023. TJ, thank you once again, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks so much, man. It's always a pleasure getting to come on and have a chat with you on Still Loading. And thank you again to all the listeners of the Still Loading podcast. And here's to 2024, my friend.
I will see you there, sir. With all that said, everyone, thank you all for listening, and I will see you all next time.